Thank you, Igor. Thank you all. And it's so sad not to see many members of our association here and other speakers, but well, that's how it is. Like the whole shipping industry worldwide, shipbuilding industry also has been badly affected by the corona pandemic everywhere. Shipbuilding industry has been also affected by in some countries, especially China, I think, by the actions of their governments, which in some cases actually either prevented shipyards to carry on with their day-to-day production, or they intervened in their day-to-day production, and the shipyards, as well as their suppliers of equipment and material, found themselves in difficulties how to maintain the momentum of construction of the vessels in their order books, how to maintain the agreed contractual delivery date. Are they going to have difficulties with their buyers? Are they going to face huge liabilities for being late, etc.? So my subject today, I think, comes in a very right time, I would say. It deals with extension of time clauses in shipbuilding contracts, and we often refer to them as a force majeure clauses. This thing doesn't. Sorry. So my presentation today deals with force majeure clauses in English law shipbuilding contracts. And why is that? It's simply because English law is the most common law of international shipbuilding contracts worldwide. I don't want to spend too much time on talking about the legal nature of shipbuilding contracts, because it would take so much time. But I would just say that shipbuilding contract is an agreement for construction and sale of a vessel as a future good, in accordance with her description, with a defined date of delivery of the vessel. I underline deliberately these last few words because the core of my presentation today is keeping the defined date of delivery date. In European continental laws, including Croatian law, when we talk about force majeure, we can look into the law, like civil code or obligations act, whatever, and we'll find provisions and definitions of force majeure there. But that's not the case in England. The English law does not have a doctrine of force majeure. It's entirely up to the parties to the shipbuilding contract to agree what event or what situation would be treated or as a force majeure, or what situation will constitute force majeure as a situation where the builder, in our case, the shipyard, should be released from the liability to keep the construction period and delivery date as agreed. So what the parties in the contract normally agree when they come to clause of force majeure. Force majeure provisions are normally included in clauses which deal with the delayed delivery of the vessel. Normally, title of such clauses are extension of delivery date including force majeure, or delays of delivery of the vessel including force majeure, etc. And they list the events which they have agreed that they would constitute a force majeure. And by definition, or by the nature of those events, they should be beyond the builder's control, obviously. They should not be foreseen or anticipated at the time by the builder, at the time when the contract was made, and they are likely to cause delay in construction and or delivery of the vessel. So all three of these elements are important to treat some situation or event as a force majeure situation. The third one, likely to cause delay, is very important, particularly word to cause delay. Causality is, I would say, a core of my presentation today. We'll see why. In shipbuilding contracts worldwide, the list of force majeure events are more or less similar everywhere. In some cases, they are longer. In some cases, they're a bit shorter. But generally, they include situations like war or warlike events, or terrorist attacks or riots, imposition of embargoes, actions by the government of the builder's place prohibiting or preventing the builder from proceeding with the shipbuilding. That's exactly what I said at the beginning. Because of the pandemic governments in some countries, including China in the first place, as far as I'm told, have intervened and prohibited, even preventing the builder for a period of time to close the shipyard, forget your order book, forget contracts, just close the shipyard. Extraordinary weather conditions, strikes, lockouts, explosions, fires, disruptions of power supply, defects, material, equipment, etc. So you can see all those events which are really beyond the shipyard's control, and they were not anticipated at the time when the contract was made. And the more difficult part comes, and they should be likely to cause the delays in construction, the shipyard hopes. Every buyer and every court, let's say, I would say in England, the court and the arbitrators would want the buyer to be in the position to expect the shipyard to tell them when his ship will be delivered. Every buyer is entitled to know when his ship will be delivered. Is it on the date written in the contract? Or if not that date, which other date? Therefore, the shipyard is required, and this has become very common practice worldwide, and is required by contract to send a notice of delay to the buyer. Why? Because sending a notice of delay to the buyer, telling him your ship will not be delivered on contract date, but it will be delivered on such and such date, is a condition precedent to the application of the extension of time provisions in the shipbuilding contract that the shipyard in such force majeure situations wants to rely on. So what kind of notice should be sent to the buyer? Not just a notice. I saw many kinds of notices which were really not good notices and didn't help the shipyard at all. These notices, in some contracts, are very specific about what notices should really contain, such as the date of commencement of the event, which the shipyard is referring to, the likely duration of that event, and of the date of the end of the event, and finally, new extended delivery date. For example, because of the pandemic, our government has issued an order telling us, the builder, to stop production on 1st of March 2020. Like the duration, God knows, that's also a good answer. Or, in the circumstances, we believe it will probably last not more than 3 weeks. That's also good. You can't do better than that, or 4 weeks, or 1 week, or 3 months, whatever you have a reason to believe. And when that happened, you can say, yesterday, on whatever, 4th of September, the government has withdrawn their order. We are back to work. So this is the end of the force majeure event. And we have calculated the days of this, whatever, 3 months or 4 months being shut down. And we are extending delivery date from 1st of January to 1st of June 2021, for example. And the shipyard would believe, well, we've done it. Now we are safe. Delivery date has been extended 6 months. We are not in breach of contract. Perfect. Well, the buyer, as I said, has rights to know when the vessel will be delivered. Now he is told it could not be delivered 1st of January, it could be delivered 1st of June, fine. But he doesn't have to agree what he was told in the notice. In shipbuilding contracts, the buyer reserves their rights to reject such a notice because they might not agree with it. And that's very common. In shipbuilding industry, it's very common that the buyer says, well, dear shipyard, thank you for the notice, but I don't think that's really a force majeure event. I don't think that really has interrupted your production. I don't really think you can't keep the agreed delivery date, blah, blah, blah. In short, I reject your notice of delay. We are back to square one, like nothing happened. Well, the buyer is hoping to exclude or at least limit its liability for delays in construction and delivery of the vessel. And that's why he's sending the notice. In case of Adyard Abu Dhabi in 2011 and Zhoushuang Haiwan shipyard in 2014, in both cases, the shipyard failed to send a notice of delay to the buyer. And when he was claiming the extension of time, his claim failed. The court said, you lost your right to claim extension because you didn't send any notice to the buyer. Well, sending a notice to the buyer is the step one, providing it's a good notice, clear and strictly in accordance with the contract. But that's not all. In addition to sending a notice, the builder needs to prove that the force majeure event has actually caused delays in construction or delivery of the vessel. So it's not enough to say we had a strike is listed, which lasted 21 days, and therefore we are entitled now to extend time of delivery for 21 days. They have to prove that that strike in 21 days has really caused the delivery date cannot be maintained. The construction period has been interrupted so much that delivery date will have to be extended. It's a very difficult burden of proof on the shipyard. In the case of Jerem Halkus construction in 2011, that burden of proof is very is explained in very detail. The force majeure event is in the critical path they have to prove to the buyer of delivery of the vessel for a number of days beyond the agreed delivery date. They have to say, you see, that strike we are referring to has happened between, I don't know, 1st of July and 1st of August. And in our construction diagram, you can see that this 30 days strike has really jumped into critical part of the building. We couldn't continue with the building in order to maintain the contractual delivery date. There are critical path diagrams. These are programs which shipyards have, and they have to apply it to calculate exactly whether this event is really affecting the construction program. I'm aware of a case when there are about 36 cases for which the shipyard believed they all were interrupting our construction and they were all beyond our control. When we went to arbitration, our witness expert has analyzed each of those 36 and suggested forget 35. 35 events of those 36 you are referring to are not going to help you. They were not in a critical part of your construction. But this one was. And on basis of this one, the shipyard won. If they insisted on all 36, 35 would fail, and the cost of hearing spent on those 35 would be for the shipyard's account, although they won. So it's very tricky question for the shipyard. And third one, the shipyard has to prove that it has done all it can to avoid or minimize the actual delay in delivery of the vessel. You can't just sit and wait. You know, this thing, event which was listed in the contract has happened. What can we do? We are going to sit and wait until that comes to an end, and then we proceed with the construction. That doesn't work. The principle of mitigation of loss is always implied term. What happens if the shipyard doesn't do that? If the shipyard fails on the notice, if it fails to prove that force majeure event has really caused the disruption of the construction period and extension of delivery date, and if they can't prove that, they are facing the liquidated damages, which is usual consequence under the shipbuilding contract, payable for every day of delay of the vessel as a compensation for the buyer's loss. But that's one option. The other worse option is that the buyer can treat the contract has come to an end because of the substantially late delay in delivery, and they can decide to terminate the contract and claim refund of every installments paid during construction, together with interest, and in some cases they can claim damages for shipyard's repudiation of contract. So it's quite serious, and these things happen quite often. In order to avoid the liability, in order to use the extension of time provisions as a very good tool for the shipyard when they find themselves in situations like pandemic or similar. It's not just simply, as I said, to have a force majeure clauses in the contract. It's more than that, as we heard. But in order to be able to manage all what's required, all what I was talking about, the shipyard should be well organized. Every shipyard should have in place a strict documentary policy, to have a critical path diagram, which I mentioned earlier, to have a system of recording relevant events that are causing delays of construction. You have to have the whole department which follows these events, and you have to have in place a system of prompt notification to the buyer. Without all this, you are struggling as a shipyard to maintain and to rely on your extension of time clauses. Very difficult. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zoran. Now it's time for questions, time for discussion. So if anybody has any comment or question for either Peter and Diana, or Giovanni, or Axel, or Zoran, please go ahead, switch on your microphone and pose some questions. Anybody here in the room willing to discuss?
May I, Igor?
Michel.
I'm just going to read. The last message because Zoran couldn't see it. The message says from our colleague Francisco Torres. Thank you very much, Professor Tasić. Clear and excellent presentation. That's what was written in the chat.
Say that.
Thank you very much, Professor Tasić. Clear and excellent presentation. Yes. I have a very short question for Zoran. The lockdown that we had for a period of weeks or months, to what extent did it affect the practice, or are you familiar with any practice whereby the shipyards were calling upon anywhere, in general, where they were calling upon a possible, let's say, a force majeure?
Yeah. Well,
Well, I don't know from first hand, but I'm told, and I read articles about a number of Chinese shipyards who had to, as I said earlier in my presentation, who had to really close down the whole site, the whole yard, because they were ordered to do so by their government. Equally, badly affected people by the events where they are suppliers of equipment and material from other countries. So it has become how to put it, a chain effect where their suppliers of equipment and material will send force majeure notice under their supply agreement to the shipyard will receive it and say, well, we just pass it on to our buyer, saying, oh, the buyer, we can't proceed with the construction of your ship because we just got a force delay notice from our suppliers. They are late and they have no idea when they will be able to send us auxiliary engine or whatever equipment. And therefore, we can't tell you when we are going to build your ship. And that sounds like very logical chain of events, but not necessarily. As I said in my presentation, it depends in each particular case. If particular part of equipment is late because of the events, the shipyard will have to prove whether this delay of equipment coming to the yard is really affecting the construction program of the shipyard. For example, very often shipyards order equipment and material early in time in order to get better price, to get a better delivery days, etc., etc. So they order things, for example, which by the diagram of construction should come really relevant to be installed in the vessel in 10 months' time, right? But they ordered it already and they paid for it. And now they received a notice from the supplier saying, sorry, we got, Corona situation, we can't produce this equipment you paid for, so we have no idea how late that will be, but we will, do our best, blah, blah, blah. So if the yard on that basis comes now and says, we reserve our right to extend delivery of the vessel, I don't think it would work. Come on, this equipment is due to be installed in 10 months' time. You're already now seeking extension of delivery date. That wouldn't help, really. And this is the case where probably the buyer would reject such a notice of delay. It wouldn't be acceptable. That's why I mentioned all those burdens of proof on the shipyard when situation like that happens. Well, there are Croatian companies, obviously, which had difficulties with late deliveries of the equipment that they paid for without knowing anything at all, when that will happen, etc. There were cases when the supplier and company has gone bankrupt, so they can't send the paid for equipment or material at all because they don't exist anymore. It's very good force majeure event because such event is listed in the yard. But as I said, that's not enough. You have to prove, A, have you tried to find the equipment somewhere else to mitigate the loss as soon as quickly as possible? Does that really affect your construction period at the time when you send the notice of delay to the buyer? If it does, well, you should have a right to extend your time because it's not your fault. But if it doesn't fit into your critical path criteria, it will be very difficult.
Any other questions for Zoran or for other speakers? I'm glad that Professor Francisco Torres sent the message in chat also to everyone smiling. You don't know, but Professor Torres also was supposed to give a presentation on, if I'm not wrong, intellectual property in shipbuilding.
Oh, right.
And you were supposed to be together in the same panel. But then first, because of Corona, his live participation became impossible. then even the online. Francisco, are you listening? Can you have your video, please? Then also Francisco is the dean at the faculty of law at University of Vigo in Spain. It's very busy this week and also some private issues, so he excused himself for delivering that.
But did he send a notice?
But we all hope that he will come not only next year for the conference, but also we were talking. We were actually in an email correspondence for almost 2 years, and I'm hoping to agree on some form of Erasmus cooperation between University of Vigo and University of Rijeka with Iraq, with also online, and hopefully we will have some students from Vigo coming to Rijeka and vice versa, and also this includes cooperation with Dubrovnik, naturally, because Massimiliano and also Elena, who is not online anymore, but also supposed to come here before this outbreak of the second wave of Corona within the framework of Erasmus exchange. So, Francisco, best regards from all of us. Thank you for following us, and hope to meet you in person next year or even before.
Francisco, I wasn't attending this event last year because I was in Vigo.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Ryu.
And I think Laura is also.
Thank you so much for your kindness.
So we'll establish cooperation with Galicia.
Wow. Wonderful place, as Gracia.
Any other comments? If not, we could slowly conclude today's Zoom meeting. Tomorrow we will start with transport law referenda. Our colleague Professor Massimiliano Musi will tell, before his presentation, will tell something about the background of Translofer and about the electronic journal, international transport law, and all the speakers of the Translofer are invited to submit their papers. Also, perhaps for Giovanni Manchefalo, I put it as also to mention yesterday's offer. Giovanni, I don't know if you were following the judicial sale colloquium yesterday. Peter Lorison is editor-in-chief of European Transport Law, so your presentation is the perfect topic for contribution there. And also the third option, now Adriana is not online anymore, so I would not like to speak without a specific...
Yes, I am.
Not Diana, but Adriana. But
yes, here I am.
I was supposed to also propose, like last year, the other maritime law topics could be included in the comparative maritime law journal. But Massimiliano will tell more about this electronic journal tomorrow. So we will all meet tomorrow at 9 o'clock. We are now supposed to go to prepare ourselves. We're going on a sightseeing tour at 5 o'clock to Dubrovnik. The weather is beautiful, and we are all missing you for this tour. And hopefully you will be able to join us sightseeing next year. And see you all tomorrow in this online meeting. Goodbye.
You gotta, may I just say one thing? Just one last thing, Massimiliano, if you can hear us, there is somebody sitting in front of your computer who has a beard, and he's using your camera, so make sure that nobody's trying to take your data or your private data. Just kidding. Thank you again, everybody, and see you in the morning.
Okay, see you.
Bye, see you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all speakers.
Bye.